If you think no one noticed what they did behind your back, think again. What was whispered in secret has already been heard in heaven. What was planned in darkness is about to collide with divine light. And before this message ends, you'll understand why their hidden actions are about to backfire in ways they never expected. Stay with me until the very end. Because what I'm about to reveal might completely change how you see your situation, and why you were protected the whole time. They thought the night would protect them, they thought the silence would hide them, they thought no one would ever trace the whispers, the lies, the manipulation, and the silent sabotage back to their hands, but what they forgot, what they underestimated, was that darkness is not empty and silence is not blind, because even when human eyes are closed and human ears are distracted, heaven is fully awake, and God saw what they did in the dark. Every secret conversation, every jealous glance, every plan formed behind your back, every fake smile masking hidden resentment, every quiet attempt to block your progress while pretending to support you, he saw it all, not as a distant observer but as a righteous judge who measures motives as clearly as actions, because while people can manipulate narratives and twist stories to make you look unstable, ungrateful, dramatic, or unworthy, they cannot manipulate the one who weighs the heart, and that is why what feels delayed to you is not denied, it is being documented, because divine justice is never rushed and never random, it is precise, intentional, and unstoppable, and right now you may be confused wondering why the lies seem to win for a moment, why the betrayal went unpunished, why the people who hurt you appeared comfortable while you were left rebuilding your confidence piece by piece, but understand this deeply. Exposure does not happen in noise. It happens in timing, and when the timing is perfect, the same darkness they used as a cover will become the spotlight that reveals them, because God does not expose to embarrass randomly, He exposes to restore order, to protect His child, and to make sure that what was done in secret cannot continue unchecked. And maybe you are in a season where you feel isolated, misunderstood, even doubting your own instincts because gaslighting can make truth feel like imagination. But the fact that you survived what was designed to break you is proof that something greater was shielding you, because if those attacks had fully succeeded, you would not even have the clarity you have now, and that alone tells you that the plan against you was intercepted, not by coincidence but by divine intervention, and while they were calculating strategies to diminish you, heaven was calculating protection to elevate you. Because what they saw as an opportunity to weaken you was actually the pressure that refined you, and here is the part they never anticipated: the darkness they operated and trained you to discern light more clearly. It strengthened your intuition, sharpened your boundaries, and forced you to depend less on validation from people and more on alignment with purpose, and that shift is dangerous to anyone who relied on your ignorance to control you, because once you become aware, manipulation loses power, and once God reveals truth to you, deception loses influence. And that is why their panic begins not when you confront them, but when circumstances begin exposing them without your effort, when inconsistencies start surfacing, when allies begin noticing patterns, when lies start contradicting themselves, because exposure orchestrated by God requires no shouting from you, it requires patience. And patience feels heavy when you want immediate justice, but patience is powerful because it allows truth to unfold in a way no one can deny. And you must resist the urge to defend yourself in every room, because sometimes your silence is not weakness, it is strategy, it is trust, it is the confidence that if God saw it, God will address it, and while addressing may not always look like public humiliation for them, it will always look like elevation for you, and elevation is the most undeniable form of vindication, because when someone tries to bury your reputation and yet your opportunities expand, when they attempt to isolate you and yet new connections appear, when they work to block your path and yet unexpected doors open, that is not luck, that is correction, divine correction adjusting what human interference tried to distort, and the more you understand this, the less anxious you become about revenge, because revenge is small compared to restoration, and restoration is what shifts entire trajectories, not just temporary emotions. And the truth is some people were comfortable hurting you because they assumed you would never realize the depth of their betrayal. They assumed you would stay naive, that you would continue giving access without discernment, that you would question yourself instead of questioning their inconsistency, but when clarity arrives, it changes dynamics permanently, because once you see the pattern, you cannot unsee it, and once God confirms what your intuition suspected, you stop negotiating with red flags, and that is when separation happens naturally, not dramatically, but decisively. And sometimes the greatest exposure is distance, because when you step back, their behavior becomes more obvious to others, and when you stop covering for them, their character speaks for itself. And understand this carefully, darkness always overestimates itself, it believes that because something has not been exposed yet, it never will be, but time is not protection, it is a countdown, and the same God who allowed you to see just enough to protect yourself is the same God who allowed them just enough rope to reveal themselves. Because patterns always repeat when unchecked, and repetition creates evidence. And evidence creates clarity, and clarity creates consequences, and you may not see consequences instantly, but consequences do not require your supervision, they require divine order, and divine order cannot be bribed, manipulated, or delayed beyond its appointed moment, and this is why your focus must shift from what they did to what you are becoming. Because your growth is the part they cannot control. They may have influenced narratives, but they cannot influence destiny. They may have delayed comfort, but they cannot cancel calling, and what they did in the dark was real, it hurt, it confused you, it maybe even cost you relationships or opportunities, but what God is doing in the light will outweigh what they attempted in the shadows. And there is something powerful about realizing that every tear you cried in private was seen, every prayer whispered in exhaustion was recorded. Every moment you chose integrity instead of retaliation was strengthening your foundation, because character built under pressure becomes unshakable, and unshakable people cannot be destroyed by gossip, and gossip always expires when confronted with consistency. And consistency is what you must maintain now, not to prove them wrong, but to honor the growth within you, because once exposure begins, you will be tempted to say, "I told you so," you will be tempted to replay every detail to validate your pain. But maturity is choosing peace over performance, it is allowing truth to speak without you forcing it. Because forced truth sounds defensive, but revealed truth sounds undeniable, and when God reveals something, He does it in layers, protecting you while correcting them, and sometimes correction does not look like dramatic downfall, sometimes it looks like distance from access to you, sometimes it looks like opportunities shifting away from them, sometimes it looks like them facing the same tactics they used on you. Because whatever is sown eventually returns, not as coincidence, but as principle, and while they were sowing deception, you were sowing resilience, and resilience multiplies into strength, and strength attracts elevation, and elevation changes circles, and new circles bring new standards, and new standards make old behavior uncomfortable, and that discomfort is not your responsibility to fix, because your responsibility is alignment, alignment with truth, alignment with integrity, alignment with the quiet confidence that you do not need to expose anyone manually. When heaven already has the file open, and as this season unfolds, you may notice subtle shifts, conversations you are no longer included in, rooms you are no longer invited to, dynamics that feel different, and instead of interpreting that as rejection, interpret it as protection, because when God sees what was done in the dark, He does not simply react, He repositions. And repositioning can feel like loss before it feels like blessing, but loss of access to toxicity is gain of access to peace, and peace is priceless, and the more peaceful you become, the clearer you see that what they did was less about you and more about their insecurity, because secure people do not sabotage others, fulfilled people do not secretly compete, healed people do not quietly attack, so their actions revealed their internal state more than your worth, and once you understand that, you stop internalizing betrayal as proof of inadequacy, and you start recognizing it as proof of misalignment, and misalignment always collapses eventually, because it cannot sustain truth, and truth does not need noise to win, it needs time, and time is moving even now, aligning circumstances in ways you cannot fully see yet, but you will, and when you do, you will realize that what felt like unfair delay was actually strategic development, because had exposure happened earlier, you might have reacted emotionally and damaged your own credibility, but now you are stronger, calmer, wiser, and when truth surfaces, you will not need to scream, your life will testify, your peace will testify, your growth will testify, and the same people who doubted you will quietly reassess, not because you forced them to, but because evidence speaks louder than emotion, and in that moment you will understand that God saw what they did in the dark was never just a warning to them, it was reassurance to you, reassurance that you were never crazy, never overreacting, never imagining the shift in energy, never wrong for protecting your boundaries, and that reassurance is the beginning of confidence rebuilt on solid ground, because when you know heaven validates your experience, you no longer beg earth for acknowledgement, and that freedom changes everything, it changes how you walk into rooms, how you respond to subtle disrespect, how you choose connections, how you guard your peace. And that transformation is more powerful than revenge ever could be, because revenge keeps you tied to the offense, but transformation releases you into purpose, and purpose is what they tried to disrupt, but purpose protected by God cannot be dismantled by hidden agendas, it can only be delayed for development, and development prepares you for visibility, and visibility built on integrity cannot be permanently stained by lies, because lies require maintenance and truth sustains itself. And the people who operated in darkness eventually grow tired of maintaining stories that contradict reality, and cracks begin to show, and when cracks show, light enters, and when light enters, illusions dissolve, and when illusions dissolve, clarity spreads, and when clarity spreads, accountability follows, and accountability may not look like public apology, but it will look like separation of influence, it will look like diminished credibility, it will look like lost access, and sometimes that is more impactful than dramatic confrontation. Because influence is what they valued, and when influence weakens, so does their ability to harm, and while they process consequences, you will be stepping into spaces that once felt out of reach, because what they meant for obstruction became preparation, and preparation positions you higher than they imagined, and in the end, the greatest evidence that God saw what they did in the dark will not be their exposure, it will be your elevation, your peace, your clarity, your strength and discernment, your unwavering boundaries, and your refusal to return to environments that required you to shrink. Because you now understand that being chosen by God does not mean being untouched by betrayal, it means being preserved through it, and preservation is proof of purpose, and purpose always outlives sabotage, so keep moving forward without bitterness, keep building without fear, keep trusting without naivety, keep believing without desperation, because the chapter they wrote in secret has already been edited by a higher hand, and what remains is not the shadow of what they did, but the light of who you are becoming, and that light is unstoppable, and as you continue forward, there is something even deeper you must understand about this season, because when God saw what they did in the dark, He was not only observing their actions, He was also measuring your response, weighing your restraint, strengthening your spirit in ways that could only be developed under pressure, because anyone can remain calm when they are celebrated, but it takes spiritual maturity to remain grounded when you are misunderstood, and this is where your true transformation began, not when they smiled in your face, but when their energy shifted and you felt it before you could explain it, when conversations became coded, when support turned conditional, when encouragement slowly carried undertones of comparison, and you started questioning whether you were imagining it, but deep down your spirit knew something was off. And that inner knowing was not paranoia, it was discernment being activated, because betrayal often arrives disguised as familiarity, and sabotage rarely announces itself loudly, it moves quietly, strategically, patiently, waiting for moments of vulnerability, and yet what they failed to realize is that while they were studying your weaknesses, heaven was fortifying your strengths. While they were planning your limitation, God was planning your expansion. And the very isolation they attempted to create became the environment where your confidence stopped depending on applause and started depending on alignment, and alignment is powerful because once you are aligned with truth, no lie can permanently destabilize you. It may shake you temporarily, it may hurt, it may cost you sleep and clarity for a season, but it cannot uproot what is divinely planted, and the reason you survived what was designed to emotionally exhaust you is because your foundation was never in their approval, even if you thought it was. It was in something higher, something unseen, something steady, and now, as you reflect on everything that unfolded, you begin to see patterns that once confused you. You see how certain opportunities closed abruptly only to redirect you somewhere better, how certain relationships distanced themselves only to make room for healthier connections, how certain doors slammed loudly but later you realized they were protecting you from environments that would have drained you further. And this is the part most people miss about divine justice: it does not only expose wrongdoing, it repositions the targeted person for greater stability, and repositioning can feel uncomfortable because it often requires letting go of illusions, letting go of who you thought people were, letting go of expectations that were built on assumptions rather than evidence, and letting go is painful when your heart was sincere, because you never operated with hidden motives, you never calculated harm. You never smiled while secretly competing, so when you discovered that others were capable of that duality, it shook your perception, but what shook you did not break you, it sharpened you, it made you more observant without becoming paranoid, more cautious without becoming closed, more selective without becoming bitter, and that balance is growth, real growth, not the loud kind that announces itself on social media, but the quiet kind that changes how you respond to subtle disrespect, how quickly you withdraw from misalignment, how confidently you say no without over-explaining, because now you understand that access to you is a privilege, not an entitlement, and anyone who misused that access forfeited it, not because you are angry, but because you are aware, and awareness is a gift that often comes through pain, and while they thought they were getting away with hidden agendas, they were actually revealing their character through repetition. Because people who operate in darkness cannot sustain consistency, eventually contradictions surface, energy shifts become obvious, and others begin noticing what you noticed months ago, and when that happens, you must resist the temptation to celebrate their exposure as if it is your victory, because your victory is not their downfall, your victory is your development, your stability, your peace that no longer fluctuates based on their behavior. And peace at that level is intimidating to those who relied on your emotional reactions to feel powerful, because when you stop reacting, they lose leverage. When you stop explaining, they lose narrative control. When you stop seeking validation, they lose influence, and suddenly the same darkness they operated in begins suffocating them, not because you retaliated, but because truth naturally surfaces in time, and time is something no one can manipulate forever. And here is what makes this season even more profound: the attacks were not random. They were often triggered by your progress, your potential, your quiet growth that did not require constant announcement, because light irritates eyes that are comfortable in shadows, and when you begin shining without arrogance, without hostility, simply by existing authentically, it exposes insecurities in others who are still battling their own internal struggles, and instead of healing, they chose to compete; instead of communicating, they chose to conspire; instead of celebrating, they chose to undermine. And that choice says more about their character than your value, because secure individuals do not need to dim someone else's light to feel bright, and once you truly internalize that, you stop personalizing sabotage, you stop asking why you were not enough, and you start recognizing that you were too aligned to remain in spaces built on insecurity, and that realization liberates you from self-doubt, because self-doubt is often the residue of being around people who projected their limitations onto you. And now that projection no longer sticks, because you see it clearly, and clarity creates boundaries. And boundaries create protection, and protection sustains peace, and peace sustains progress, and progress is what unsettles those who expected you to stay stagnant after what they did, because they assumed the betrayal would weaken you permanently, they assumed the rumors would damage your confidence, they assumed the silent exclusion would make you beg for inclusion, but instead you grew quieter, stronger, more intentional. And that unexpected resilience unsettled them more than any confrontation ever could, because resilience signals independence, and independence removes control, and once control is gone, manipulation collapses, and when manipulation collapses, truth becomes unavoidable, and even if they never publicly admit what they did, even if apologies never come, even if closure looks different than you imagined, understand that closure does not require confession from them. It requires confirmation within you, confirmation that you did not imagine the shift. Confirmation that your intuition was valid, confirmation that God indeed saw every detail and shielded you from outcomes that could have been far worse, because sometimes what you call injustice is actually interruption of a path that would have entangled you deeper in environments that were not meant for your long-term future, and now as you step into new spaces with refined discernment, you carry lessons instead of bitterness, wisdom instead of wounds, standards instead of fear. And that evolution is irreversible, because once you have experienced divine protection in the midst of hidden attacks, you walk differently, you trust differently, you connect differently, and most importantly, you no longer panic when darkness attempts to intimidate you, because you have already seen how that story ends, you have already lived through sabotage that backfired. You have already witnessed lies unravel without your intervention, and that memory strengthens your faith for whatever comes next, because you now understand at a deeper level that nothing done in secret escapes divine awareness, nothing whispered maliciously goes unheard, nothing plotted against you overrides what is written for you, and that understanding creates a calm confidence that cannot be faked, a steady assurance that even when you do not immediately see justice, justice is forming, even when you do not immediately see exposure. Exposure is aligning, even when you do not immediately see restoration. Restoration is preparing, and preparation always precedes elevation, and elevation built through adversity carries weight, depth, humility, and authority that easy seasons could never produce, and that authority will open doors you once knocked on in desperation but now walk through with composure, because you no longer chase validation, you embody value, and when you embody value, the right environments recognize it without persuasion, and the wrong ones feel threatened by it, and that distinction no longer confuses you. It guides you, because confusion was a byproduct of being in spaces where authenticity was inconvenient, but now authenticity is your anchor, and you are no longer willing to compromise it for temporary acceptance, because you have learned the cost of ignoring subtle red flags, you have learned the price of overextending grace without boundaries. You have learned that loyalty without discernment becomes vulnerability to exploitation, and those lessons were not wasted, they were investments into a stronger version of you, a version that cannot be easily manipulated, cannot be easily silenced, cannot be easily derailed, and while they may have believed their actions in the dark would permanently hinder you, the truth is those very actions accelerated your awakening, refined your standards, deepened your spiritual awareness, and positioned you for a future far beyond the small narratives they tried to trap you in, and that is the ultimate irony, that what was intended to confine you became the catalyst that expanded you, and as you continue forward from this chapter, let your focus remain on growth rather than grievance, on purpose rather than payback, on alignment rather than approval, because the same God who saw what they did in the dark is the same God illuminating your path in the light, and the light you now carry is not fragile, it is forged, it is tested, it is unshakable, and it will guide you into rooms, relationships, and opportunities where secrecy is replaced with sincerity, where competition is replaced with collaboration, where manipulation is replaced with mutual respect, and when you arrive there, you will realize that nothing you endured was pointless, nothing you cried over was unseen, nothing you questioned was ignored, because every hidden act against you was accounted for, and every quiet act of integrity from you was rewarded in ways far greater than revenge could ever offer, and that is why you can move forward now without fear, without resentment, without needing to prove anything to anyone, because the truth already stands, heaven already knows, and what was done in the dark has already triggered the light that will carry you higher than they ever anticipated.